to our webinar, Warning Signs, Treatment, and Suicide Reduction in Dealing with Depression. We have a really great group of professionals and community activists with us today. I'm so glad that we're discussing this because this is such an important subject, an important topic, not just for our community, but nationally. As you'll find out today, this has been a real challenge throughout the country, especially in the mountain states, in terms of dealing with depression, suicide reduction, and other at-risk challenges. You may notice that we adjusted the title from Warning Signs, Treatment, and Suicide Reduction to, it was originally Suicide Prevention. And we felt that that term was not really appropriate because, unfortunately, some suicides are not preventable. And so what we're really going to focus on is reducing those numbers. We have a number of fantastic guests with us today, and we are going to start off by introducing Kathy Valentine. Kathy is a retired school counselor who volunteers with a number of organizations in Boulder County. Presently, she works with the students in Coley's Closet, which is a peer education program in the Boulder Valley School District. We're going to learn more about that wonderful program in a moment. And she's also the chairperson for the Hope Coalition of Boulder County. We're very proud to be partnering with the Hope Coalition for this webinar broadcast. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Kathy Valentine.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. And basically what I'm going to talk about today would be about the Hope Coalition of Boulder County. We are a group of people who came together in 2005 from different agencies in Boulder County. All of them were dealing with working with people with depression, trying to spread the word about the stigma of depression, meaning it's okay to talk about it, etc. So we all came together, became the Hope Coalition of Boulder County, with the sole reason what we do is educate. And we say that we have a vision. We envision a community where there is no stigma about depression. Community members are able to identify depression. Seeking help is viewed as a sign of strength. Suicide is no longer considered a solution. So our mission is to educate, engage, and empower the community about depression awareness and suicide reduction in order to save lives. So again, our major thing is that we really want to educate the community in lots of different, all across the community, meaning all ages. So yes, we work with youth. We don't work with them, but we talk with them. We also talk with middle-aged. We talk with the elderly. We are wanting everyone in the community to hear the same message, which is, these are the warning signs, which you will hear on this webcast a little bit later. These are the risk factors. This is what you can do. Here are our resources in the community and how to take care of yourself if you're feeling this way. Hope is, what we do is we put on 3 different events throughout the year for the community. All of them are free. The first one that's coming up is on October 29th. It's at Centaurus High School, and it's called the Hope Event. And this event is for youth and families to come together 6:30 till 8:30 in the evening. And you will be learning about warning signs, risk factors. You'll hear stories from youth and about their journeys into and out of, hopefully, depression, how they've taken care of themselves, a chance for you to talk with other parents. And this is an annual event that's been going on for 11 years. So this is our 11th year of doing the Hope Event. We'd love to have anyone come. There is a registration on, I believe it's going to be on a slide, the Parent Engagement Network.org is a registration, but it's free. You can show up if you don't have time to register. The second one we are doing this year is the Candlelight Vigil. It's called Hope Lights the Night. That's on November 19th. It's at a church in Table Mesa. You can find out more about that on our website, hopecoalitionboulder.org. And this is in memory of those who have been lost to us. The third one will be in March, and this year we're hoping to focus on more information will be out about that as we get closer. The one thing that we want to make sure people understand about the Hope Coalition is that we really do deal with all age groups. We give education to all age groups. So the risk groups, many people think that adolescents are the highest risk group for suicide, and this is not true. Probably we think that because it's in the it's out in the media a lot. But the highest at risk and the highest group for suicides, unfortunately, are the middle-aged people from about 40 to 65 years of age. The second highest are the elderly, 75 and up. Sometimes people get pretty confused about that and are very surprised. But again, the Hope Coalition strives to talk to all of the different age groups. Also, some people are pretty interested in knowing that the mountain states, Rocky Mountain states, have the highest suicide rate as well. Wyoming is number 1. Colorado is number 8, although I think it slipped to number 9, which is interesting. One of the highest groups that seems to be building in Colorado is, again, the middle-aged group. And they're wondering why. Many people ask why it would be that the Rocky Mountain area would have the higher suicide rates. Some people think it has to do with altitude. Many people think it has to do with the fact that there is a feeling of you can do it yourself kind of thing. And excuse me, another reason would be the people are, these states, if you think of Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, the population centers are pretty distinct in a lot of rural areas where they may not have access to good services. So those are two theories as to why this might be. But it's another reason that the Hope Coalition came together, because we wanted to address this particular awful statistic. A couple of the other resources that the Hope Coalition works with is Coley's Closet, as Jan mentioned. Coley's Closet is a peer education program only in BVSD. Again, it's a grassroots, both of these are grassroots organizations for Boulder County. Group of high school students who are trained to go into classrooms in middle and high school, usually the health classrooms, at the request of the teachers, to talk to their peers about depression and suicide awareness, and what to do if they're concerned about themselves or others. Where are the resources in their schools and in their community? Last year, the Coley's Closet these members spoke with 2,600 students in the Boulder Valley District. Pretty awesome program. They spread the word. They're there not as a support group, but they are there as an education group. The second one that I would mention is Second Wind Fund of Boulder County. If youth 19 and under are expressing suicidal tendencies or severe depression, the school counselors and interventionists and these youth do not have resources, money, they don't have insurance, or they're underinsured. The Second Wind Fund is available for those students, and they can have up to 12 sessions free with a licensed therapist in Boulder County. So those are some of the organizations that the Hope Coalition works with. That is what the Hope Coalition is here to do in our community. And we're hoping that we will have many of you at our Hope event on the 29th of October at Centaurus High School. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you, Kathy. And, we are so lucky in our community to have these 3 incredible nonprofit groups: the Hope Coalition, Coley's Closet, Second Wind Fund of Boulder County. These are groups that you can get very involved in. The more involved as a community we get in this issue, the sooner we will be able to turn it around and resolve it. So I would really encourage you. I'm going to show you some slides in a minute with some contact information. We're going to repeat those slides as we go. I would really encourage you to get to know Coley's Closet, Hope Coalition, Second Wind Fund of Boulder County, and get involved. If you have a high school child that maybe has some interest in participating in Coley's Closet, they would love to hear from you. The Second Wind Fund amazingly provides free counseling by licensed therapists for students identified by school personnel for being at risk for suicide or experiencing significant symptoms of depression. We are fortunate to have these resources in the community. So please get involved with them. If you can, please support these wonderful efforts. These are grassroots efforts that really began with community members getting together, recognizing the problem, rolling up their sleeves and trying to do something about it. Let's support these organizations moving forward. In terms of resources, there are crisis lines that are available to you. You can see them on your slide. So I will not read them out to you. And this is just 4. I'm sure there are more, but these are kind of the key ones for our area as well as nationally. And I would really encourage you to sort of keep this information somewhere if and when you need it. Hopefully you won't. But if you do, you have a resource that you can go to immediately. There's also a number of counseling resources available in our community that I want to spend just a moment talking about. The Mental Health Center, which is now Mental Health Partners, is available to folks of lower income who qualify for their services. They have a wealth of mental health services available through the Mental Health Partners group. Another precious resource in our community, and through the years, they've been trying to do more and more with less and less funding. And so certainly this is something that we want to help out with too, in terms of Mental Health Partners and all the fantastic work that they do in our community. We are also fortunate to have a local psychiatric hospital. As you may know, there are fewer and fewer psychiatric hospitals available, not just in our community, but nationwide. And we are just so lucky to have a excellent psychiatric hospital like Centennial Peaks in our community. They're located in Louisville, not far from Monarch K-8, Monarch High School. And they're a great resource. If, for example, you are concerned about your child's safety, they will do an emergency assessment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a good idea to call ahead first. You see that you have their number there, the 303-673-990, or you could go to their website, obviously, centennialpeaks.com. I also wanted to list the contact information for Second Wind Fund of Boulder County. We mentioned it. Kathy spoke about it earlier. Another great group. Find out more about them by visiting their website. We also have the Boulder Counseling Cooperative in the community. This is a resource that is staffed by generous licensed therapists from the community who provide counseling services for as little as $20 per session. And so this is another community resource. You can find out more about the cooperative by going to bouldercounseling.org. There's our group as well, Boulder Psychological Services. We have almost 20 licensed therapists. You're going to be hearing actually from some of our therapists in a moment who are joining us for this webinar. We're always available for counseling services. We do a tremendous amount of free community presentations. If you're interested in having us help you in your school, church, community, we're a phone call away. You can contact me directly with any questions about our services and also any questions about the webinar today by calling our number, 720-217-3270, or you can email me directly at info@boulderpsychologicalservices.com. Another great resource that we have in the community is the Boulder County Prevention and Intervention Program. If you're not aware of this fantastic service, in many of the middle schools and I believe all of the high schools in the Boulder Valley School District, we have trained interventionists. These are licensed mental health professionals, and one area of expertise that they have is around suicide assessment. These are also folks that can refer you to the Second Wind Fund if there's an issue that needs further treatment and cost is a factor. You can find out more about them by going to that web address down there or contacting them by phone at 303-678-6135. And as we mentioned earlier, we have some wonderful educational resources in our community. Anyone listening to this webinar should take a moment to look at these websites and just educate yourself. Take 5 minutes and educate yourself about these great resources so that if and when you need them, you'll know where to go. Kathy's told us about the Hope Coalition of Boulder County, and I can tell you that many years ago when it was grassroots, It was parents who tragically lost their children to suicide. It was members of the community that felt like something needed to happen. You may or may not know that we tragically lost a high school student last month to suicide, and the timing just couldn't highlight the importance of this information more, I'm sorry to say. And if I may add, I know a little bit about Coley's Closet. I'm so impressed with those youth and the incredible job that they do. You heard from Kathy, they've talked to thousands of students in our community. And guess what? When high school students hear it from another high school student, they hear it a lot better than if they're going to hear it from an old therapist like me. And so we're fortunate to have this peer education resource, completely unique in the nation, by the way, right at our doorstep. Let's find out more about Coley's. Let's support them. Let's provide them with the resources they need to continue to serve our community. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI for short, has a Boulder affiliate. And this is another wonderful resource with free support groups for folks that are struggling with mental illness or have relatives struggling with mental illness. Another great resource to learn about. And finally, the National Institute of Mental Health has some great suicide prevention information on their website, and you have their website address as well. Kathy.
I'm going to add one more that we forgot when we were working on this, and that is INME, which is the Interfaith Network on Mental Illness. Here again, a grassroots organization from Boulder County, working to spread the idea of coming together, faith-based communities coming together to work on the idea of mental health. So INMI.org, I believe, is how you can find more information. Sorry about not including them.
We appreciate that, Kathy. And I see there was a question from Boulder Floor. Will this be archived? Yes, it will. Anyone that's registered for this webinar will be getting an email from me later today, which will have the link to replay this webinar. And you're always welcome to go to we actually have a YouTube channel now, Boulder Psychological Services. If you go to YouTube and just put in Boulder Psychological Services, it'll come up. We have over 40 hours of content on a variety of topics, and our previous webinars are there as well. So yes, you'll be able to get that information archivably if you would like. I would like next to introduce Erin Dittelberger. Erin is a licensed professional counselor and has been practicing therapy with teens, children, and adults since 2007. She's worked in a residential treatment center, a domestic violence center, and several public schools with children from preschool to 12th grade. She currently has a private practice with locations in Longmont and Boulder. And Erin is going to help us with our discussion regarding the general symptoms of depression. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Erin Dittelberger.
Thanks, Jan. So I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about just general symptoms of depression, because we know there is a correlation between untreated depression and suicidality. So I think it's really important to talk about these first. And I also will preface it by saying that having these symptoms on one day is different, but these are more like persistent symptoms for 2 weeks or more that you're feeling. So it's a little different than just a bad mood. So the first one is sad or irritable mood. So if you feel irritated, agitated, we often say depression is anger turned inward. So if you think about feeling that irritation also with self and feelings of worthlessness and sadness that are pervasive throughout the day. The second one is loss of interest in activities you once enjoyed. Examples would be exercising or time with friends, hobbies, work. Large changes in your appetite or weight. So either having no appetite, really reduced appetite, or maybe eating too much. Difficulty sleeping or oversleeping. So a lot of times with clients, I'll see people who have insomnia or who wake up throughout the night, or they're sleeping all night and most of the day and are unable to get up in the morning. Also slow or agitated movements. So this really speaks to the body and mind connection of depression. So you're not only feeling this in your mind, but also in your body. A loss of energy, not just tired, but really unable to get out of bed, to never feel rested throughout the day, even if you're sleeping so much. Feelings of worthlessness or guilt. maybe internal messages like I don't deserve this, or just the feeling of anger towards oneself. And then difficulty concentrating. So I've heard a lot of clients say I'm unable to read a book, I'm unable to concentrate at work, I can't do my schoolwork. So really unable to really concentrate on anything. So you don't have to have all these symptoms to seek treatment. I think it's really important to say that. You can have a few of these and feel like you need to go in and get an assessment. So certainly feeling all these also would warrant going in and seeing if you feel like you need to talk to someone.
And that assessment, Erin, is very important. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Just as an example, I had the pleasure of doing some psychological testing with a soon-to-be 14-year-old girl just last week. And the school, the parents, there was a tremendous amount of information that made it look pretty clear that she had some depressive symptoms, but also really looked like ADHD. And after we did the extensive testing, we were able to determine that it was not ADHD, but it was this symptom of depression, that because she was significantly depressed, she was having tremendous concentration problems. So, you know, the last thing we'd want to do is give her a stimulant medication.
Mm-hmm.
This is why assessing and diagnosing can be very important in terms of understanding what needs to be treated. We had a question on our chat box about sharing the slides later. If you're interested in seeing the webinar slides, you can contact me directly. Again, info@boulderpsychologicalservices.com. I'll be happy to send you the PowerPoint. Let's move on to our next slide and talk a little bit about symptoms unique to children and adolescents. Erin, can you help us with that?
Sure. So often I've had parents come in and say that their teen is feeling really angry, irritated. There's just an increase in feelings of rage, which looks really different. I think depression looks very different in adolescents and children. I've seen this a lot. So, and also what I've seen with kids is underneath this irritability, there is that sadness, but what usually presents first is the irritability and the anger. Another symptom you see with kids, frequent absences from school and poor school performance. So grades falling substantially, failing school, skipping school. So I've seen kids who one year are getting all A's and the next year they're failing. So that's another big warning sign. A lack of interest in spending time with friends or family. For example, clients who maybe go home after school and spend the whole time in their room in the dark, aren't attending the things they used to attend, clubs or sports, not spending time with friends or family at all. Talk of or efforts to run away from home. That's a really big one. And then also social isolation and poor communication. So say that they have a peer group they hang out with and they're in track, and then they drop out of track. They've stopped hanging out with their friends. They're not talking to you. They're spending their time in their room. That would be another big red flag. And then they're unable to talk about this without getting really irritable and angry. Also extreme sensitivity to rejection. Say one incident that happens with a teacher at school or with another student, and there's just this persistent, I would say, rumination about it that seems like out of context for what happened. Reckless behavior, so like drug abuse or risky sexual behavior, skipping school to do drugs or alcohol. Also neglect of clothes, so poor hygiene, not interested in bathing, not interested in changing clothes. So I have to say that a lot of these symptoms on a lower level may show up in ordinary adolescent behavior. So I think it's important to, if you are concerned, talk to a professional about it and seek some support and figure out, is this normal adolescent development or child development, or is this something I need to be concerned about? Because a lot of these, as I look down at them, are things that we see in normal adolescent behavior. So.
And again, keep in mind, the more of these symptoms that we see, the more concerned we might want to be. And the other thing that I just want to mention, Erin already mentioned it, but I just want to mention it again, because this is something that most parents do not know. That unique to children and adolescents, we could make the diagnosis of depression, believe it or not, without sad mood. Right. This is not true with adults, but it's true of children and adolescents. And so it's very common that I'll see children and adolescents who come in because of anger issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I always assess for depression. And guess what? In a significant number of those cases, it's the underlying depression that's fueling that irritability and that anger. And so that's not something that's obvious to a parent. When your child is behaving angrily, we consequence them. But I just want you to keep this in the back of your mind that that may in fact be a symptom of depression. Let's look for a moment at some of the warning signs of suicide. And Erin's going to help us with that as well.
So as I said before, untreated depression can lead to suicide warning signs. So some symptoms of depression that have been listed above by me, they can get worse and lead to suicidal thoughts and plans if they're not treated. So it's a big warning sign. Talking about death and wanting to die. So fascination with death and telling others about their thoughts about death. Suicidal thoughts, plans, or fantasies. So I see this slide as a continuum, with the top being kind of a less intense suicide warning sign going down to the bottom there. So I would say symptoms of depression would be first, and then talking about these things would come later. So suicidal thoughts, plans, or fantasies, how they would do it, by what means would they do it? Would they do it with something they already have available? And often kids I've worked with and adults too have talked about it before they've done it. Giving away personal possessions, and then telling friends about suicidal plans. So this goes with the one about thoughts. So a lot of times people are talking about this, and I think maybe other people might not notice or say it's not a big deal, but I think it's really important to take this seriously when people are talking about their plans and also their thoughts about suicide. And then writing a note about it. I've had clients who wrote a note to their family or to their friends, and this is a huge warning sign because they're really reaching out for help in a different way.
And any of these warning signs we must take very seriously, even if it's just one of them.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to check in, get a sense as to what's going on, get a sense if treatment is indicated, etc. The other thing to consider in all of this is that one of the biggest challenges we have is the stigma that surrounds suicide. And that's why most of you weren't aware that we had a tragic suicide last month. We don't hear about it, we don't know about it, but I'm sorry to tell you that it goes on a regular basis, and the biggest challenge is around this stigma. And so, for example, most people believe that if you talk to somebody about suicide, it will increase the chances of suicide. This has been disproven consistently. And so we're going to talk about this some more, but the point that I'm making is that if you have concerns about your child, it's important, appropriate, and healthy to have a conversation with them, to ask them if they're feeling sad, to ask them if they have suicidal thoughts. And I'm jumping ahead, but I can't make that point enough.
That would be for any age, if you feel comfortable to ask.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. It's not just for
only
kids.
Mhm.
That's right. It's any age. Thank you, Kathy. And let's look for a moment at some of the additional risk factors. And I'm going to ask Erin to help us with these as well.
Okay, so first, alcohol and drug abuse. So often before we see suicidal risk, there's an increase in use of drugs and alcohol. Previous suicide attempts. So unfortunately, once someone has attempted suicide, it becomes more of an option, which is really unfortunate. Suicide completions by friends or family. So this goes along with the previous one. If you know somebody who's completed suicide, then it becomes something that is more in your mind and in your space, and can become more of an option. Availability of a gun. So most suicide completions are accomplished by firearms. So this really ups risk for suicide if someone has this availability. Cumulative effect of trauma or recent traumatic event. So this could be small traumas that add up, day-to-day traumas, or it could be something larger that sets someone over into a crisis. So it could be something as small as day-to-day stresses that just add up after 6 months or a year. Or it could be something triggered that happened a long time ago, such as childhood abuse. Unplanned pregnancy. and a family history of depression and substance abuse. So often we learn from modeling, and when those around us have modeled substance abuse and depression as ways to cope, or just have this risk factor, then it can put people who are around them for high risk. Difficulties in dealing with sexual orientation is a huge one. People who are GLBTQ really have a higher rate of suicidal ideation. It needs to be looked at minority status, which also goes with this. And the last one I think is really important, stress. I know we all have stress in modern day life, and this can be cumulative and really add up for people. And after a certain point, we really need support and the stresses of life.
And I think it's worth adding that there's a very high correlation between depression, suicide, and alcohol and substance use. And that can go either way. In other words, sometimes what we see is that the depression leads to substance abuse as an effort for that person to self-medicate, to try to treat those feelings of depression. But of course, alcohol itself is a depressant. And so it's the worst thing you could do if you're feeling depressed. It may have a short-term benefit, but you're going to end up feeling more depressed as time goes on. Similarly, we know that with many drugs and alcohol, marijuana being an example, that heavy abuse of various drugs and alcohol can actually create and cause depression. So in other words, we could see this happening either way. The depression leads to substance abuse. The substance abuse leads to depression. That's part of the reason why the correlation is so high. And so this is a factor that we want to really be thoughtful about. And let me just mention too, the availability of a gun. Believe it or not, statistically, if you have a gun in your home, you're 5 times more likely to have a suicide in your house, believe it or not, statistically speaking. So if you have a gun, critically important that it's locked up. And you know kids, they know where that key is. So you got to really be thinking 12 steps ahead. But we really want to keep those guns in a safe place if we have them in our home. And finally, the issue around stress, we've seen this constantly locally when we've had discussions with, for example, middle school students, and talk to them about, well, gee, why do you think kids abuse drugs? Why do you think kids get depressed? Why do you think they get suicide? Stress is the answer we get consistently. And so this is something else that we want to help ourselves and others. You should have seen how stressed out we were before this webinar started, for example. So we want to make sure that all of us have resources, healthy resources, to deal with stress as well.
Can I just mention one thing?
Sure.
The difficulties in dealing with sexual orientation and the minority status as a risk factor, we make sure that the students in Coley's Closet say, because someone is LGBTQ in that community, or because they are possibly minorities, either religion, racial, etc., it does not mean that they will be depressed. It doesn't mean that they will be suicidal. It's just that they can be at higher risk because of harassment, abuse, that type of thing. That we just want to make sure that that's clear.
Great. Thank you for saying.
And in fact, all of these risk factors are what we call correlational, as Kathy mentioned. There's a very high correlation, but that doesn't mean that that is necessarily a cause of anything. So very good point, Kathy, to bring up. I just want to go through the resource slides once again, and just again remind you about these crisis line resources that we have available. And this is always something that you can utilize. I like that there's a Spanish hotline. There's also a hotline specifically for GLBTQ youth, as well as our local Metro Crisis Services, which you can find out more about that resource on their website. They actually have tons of information about all kinds of community resources in addition to those serving folks with depression and suicidal thinking. And again, the counseling resources that are available to you. We're going to talk more about this in a moment, but it's very important if you have any doubt, any question about yours, your child's, a loved one, a friend's mental health status, just like we go to the medical doctor when we have physical symptoms, it's very important to go to a licensed mental health professional that has expertise with that age group and issue, and just check in and get an objective assessment as to whether you or a loved one needs more support. And so any of these counseling resources can provide that to you. And again, these educational resources, which are, we have the local resources of Hope, Coley's Coalition, the Second Wind Fund, of course, provides treatment, etc. So these are great resources for us as well. Let me introduce our next participant in our webinar, who's going to help us learn more about treatment for depression. Her name is Kate Ellard. She is a licensed psychotherapist who really considers herself a coach for families and individuals. She often helps with coaching for parenting challenges, navigating life transitions, anxiety and depression problems, and supporting teens and tweens. Really happy to have Kate Ellard here. And Kate, help us out in terms of different kinds of treatment for depression.
Thanks, Jan. Well, I have a bit of good news here because treatment is very, very effective for depression. That's found over and over again. So the good news is that if we can get to the point of asking for help, for creating a team of professionals and support system and friends and family around us and around the depression, it can be very manageable in our lives. Most of the time, mild to moderate depression can be managed well with therapy and or medication. Most think it's best to start with kind of the least invasive, as we say, treatment, which is therapy or talk therapy, which should include help with increasing healthy lifestyle habits. For severe or intense depression, it is recommended often to start with both medicine and therapy, since the depression is probably interfering greatly with one's life. It's getting in the way of your job, of your relationship, of school, and possibly having suicidal thoughts. However, it's really important to note that your treatment or treatment for your loved one is very individual to you and your situation. It's a plan that you or your team come up with together. If you start talking with educational resources, with therapists, with doctors, ask questions, disclose to them all the important information. Some examples of this talk therapy that I mentioned are cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, body-centered therapy, EMDR, medication, and fitness used as therapy. For the cognitive behavioral therapy, that's kind of a classic approach where you and a therapist get sort of underneath your stressors and your tough situations and find thought patterns or assumptions you have about your world. Sometimes we're not aware of these thought patterns, but they're kind of underlying so many of our reactions and responses to the world around us. Talking through them can bring us understanding about how we're reacting. It can bring us understanding of some of the stress that does emerge in our lives. And then you can set some new goals, keeping these new patterns in mind, goals that help you navigate your life with less stress or less stuck situations. Because all of this process lessens depression. I think it's been mentioned that depression is really, it's a combination of one or more of parts of our lives. It can be biological, genetic, it can be life stressors causing it, it can be life habits causing it. Jan talked about substance abuse. That can actually bring on depression. So there's lots of different ways to come at treating depression. But underneath it, if we can lessen some of our patterns that are causing some of our life stresses, that lessens the depression. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can be combined with just about all the other kinds of talk therapy. Another one is body-centered therapy. This work is quite varied. It can contain dance, walking, meditation, yoga, breath work, really anything that brings your attention away from your thoughts and into your body. This technique can be powerful for those of us who feel out of control because our mind is spinning all the time. It helps us be more thoughtful of our actions, reducing those knee-jerk reactions that many of us have, and more aware of our feelings. All of this, again, can lessen depression and help us manage depression. Body-centered therapy can also be combined with all the other therapies. EMDR is a holistic therapy where a simple technique helps your body reprocess distressing thoughts, events, or feelings. EMDR does stand for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. Now that's a handful. So I like to stick with EMDR. The person who kind of first found this technique kind of regrets naming it that handful, but now it's known by it. So you can look into more what that means online. There are lots of websites and information. It's simply a technique that helps the brain's natural system that processes things that happen to you. For instance, if you get frustrated that a car cuts you off on the road, you feel frustrated, you think about the event a few times, you might talk about it with friends, and eventually your nervous system that brings on that frustration, it calms down, and your mind goes on to think about other things. That's your brain and body working all the time to process things that happen to us in our lives. Sometimes these events, especially more severe events, are so overwhelming that this processing system gets stuck. It gets stuck at the point where our nervous system continues to remain stressed or frustrated, and our mind keeps replaying the event. These kind of situations that pop up for many of us much of the time, this deepens depression. If we have a tendency to have depression biologically, then it kind of exacerbates this depression. And this is where EMDR can really work by dissipating and making those events, helping the processing system and helping these events not bother us so much. EMDR often includes cognitive behavioral therapy and body-centered therapy throughout its process. Using fitness as therapy, exercise, walking, whatever we want to call it, we know the research says over and over that moderate exercise can help treat mild to moderate depression. So walking, jogging, biking, etc. for 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times per week, absolutely will help manage depression as well as other stressors in our lives. Often therapists will encourage this lifestyle habit, and they'll help with any blocks that keep you from it. Many of us have things that really get in the way from us getting outside and moving our bodies. Medication is a great tool as a part of treatment for moderate to severe depression. It can really help lift you out of kind of the hole it feels like that you're in when depression is pretty strong with you. We need to speak to a licensed psychiatrist and get an assessment with them to do this. Sometimes our doctors, our family doctors, feel comfortable prescribing this as well. But I always think if it's at all possible to see a psychiatrist who specializes especially in these mental health illnesses is really a best first step. The reason it's so important to use medication when it's needed is that it can help you lift out from the deep hole. And once you're kind of out of the deep hole, often talk therapy can help you learn some new skills, learn about depression, and manage it well. Even if at some point you want to think about getting off the medication, you'll still have those skills. But sometimes medication is so important in helping lifting us out of the stuck place. What can you all do right now? First, as Kathy mentioned, start talking about depression and suicide. Talk about it matter-of-factly with your friends, with your family. Read about it, get some more understanding, and then talk openly around the dinner table or while in the car driving your kids or at work. If you have a good relationship with your family doctor, get an appointment with them. Tell her or him your concerns. Start the conversation. And really going straight to the source is getting an assessment with and counseling from a licensed therapist or a licensed psychologist. The idea is to bring it out of hiding, bring it out of the stigma that it's had for so long, and start building a team of people where you and or your kid can get support. Learn more. There are so many books, websites, and information out there that discusses depression for adults, for youth, for elders. Just start reading and it will become a more comfortable topic to talk about. This is a way we can manage depression and reduce suicide.
Thank you, Kate. And I also want to just acknowledge a question that just came in our chat box. What do you recommend for someone who's going through unusual stress? Examples being parents getting divorced, laid off from a job, and is not yet showing serious symptoms, doesn't seem to warrant professional help, but possibly starting to just slightly tilt in that direction. I'm going to offer my feedback and then let our other participants speak to this as well. Couple of quick thoughts. One is that, believe it or not, a lot of the experienced stress that we have is not because of the situation we're in, but it's what we tell ourselves. And so we have a lot more control at reducing the level of experienced stress than we give ourselves credit for. The other thing to consider is, even if this doesn't require ongoing counseling, might be great just to have a 1 or 2 session consult with someone who has expertise in this area that can provide guidance. Sometimes, for example, I'll meet with parents just periodically just to check in regarding an issue that's going on in the family that doesn't warrant ongoing therapy, but it's just nice to have that professional consultant available. But let me open it up to my other participants if they have anything they would like to add to that.
I would say Kate gave some great ideas. Exercise, eating correctly, stay tuned to being with your friends, do things that you've always enjoyed doing, continue to do those. If it gets to the place where you feeling you can't do those anymore, then that's a warning sign to make sure to do just as Jan said, to touch base, find a therapist, touch base, get an assessment. But before that, I would say eating, exercise, and doing what you've always enjoyed doing to stay focused on the positive things in your life as well.
I agree with that. And the term I come up with is staying engaged in life. So also losing your job, that can create a big black hole of empty time. So it's really important to fill that time with things you enjoy or people you enjoy, even if it doesn't feel like it has any point, just kind of getting out there and engaging in the world. And to mirror what Jan said, yeah, that coaching and counseling, as he said, I mentioned the term coaching. I think at your level of situation that you're talking, that's where I work with a lot of people, and many therapists work with people in your situation with big life transitions. And it's just kind of the help through the transition, stress time, and you move on and you go on with your life without counseling for a time. Anything, Aaron? Okay.
And do we necessarily have to wait for the symptoms to get worse? Again, think about what we do physically. When ourselves or our loved ones have some physical symptoms, we try to get into that medical doctor pretty early on. We don't wait until the symptoms are extreme. Mm-hmm. And I would suggest the same thing goes for our mental health as well. I think it's just something that we have to kind of reframe, because I think in our society, we sort of wait too long sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then, the symptoms are more severe, take longer to treat, take longer to resolve. So early intervention is always a great idea. But where would we find those resources? How's that for segue to our next slide? Just another reminder about all the different counseling resources that we're so fortunate to have in the community. And many of these resources have sliding scale, are available. There's not a big wait time. And so this is a great list just to have available. And you might want to just kind of print it out, just have it for if and when down the road, a week, month, a year from now, you need some kind of mental health resource. These are great resources to consider. And again, those educational resources, which can be really helpful when you're just kind of trying to get clear about what's going on and what the issue is. These groups have tremendously helpful information, cost nothing. You can visit their website and learn more. We're very proud to be partnering with the Hope Coalition, as well as our partners at the Boulder Valley School District, et cetera, to provide all month long different kinds of discussions around this important topic of depression and suicide reduction. So actually tomorrow, we're going to be doing our TV show, which airs on Channel 22, is also broadcast live on bvsd.org, and finally archived on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to be discussing with Dr. Sunda Friedman Tabakhorst how we diagnose and treat mood disorders. So we're going to get into a little bit more detail than we were able to today, specifically about diagnosing and treating. And again, this will be archivally available to you if you don't watch it live. If you do have the opportunity to watch it live, it's going to be between 12:30 and 1 o'clock Thursday, tomorrow, October 16th. And if you do watch it live, participate. You can email us questions during the show through our website, boulderpsychologicalservices.com, and be part of that conversation. We'll also be in Broomfield on October 20th between 6:30 and 8 p.m. at the Mamie Dowd Eisenhower Library. And there we're going to be really focusing on teenage depression, what's normal and when to seek help. I mean, what teenager is not moody? Does that mean that they all have bipolar disorder? I hope not. So this could be a really helpful conversation to educate yourself about where to kind of draw that line. Because think about it, depression's a normal emotion. We all get depressed from time to time. How do we know when we've crossed that line? Especially if it's our, developing, moody, defiant adolescent. What's normal? What's not? This would be a great opportunity to find out more. And Erin, I think you're going to be.
Yes, I'm doing that one. I'm doing the teenage depression and children get depressed too.
Yes, and so if you want to, for example, find out what Erin looks like. You've heard her voice. Is she a 45-year-old man with a beard? Time will tell. You can find out by going to either of those two talks, which Erin is going to be participating in, the teenage depression talk, as well as children get depressed too. This is something else that I think is very important, because I think we sort of underestimate the emotional distress that young children can have. And, one of the fastest growing groups of suicidal behavior, which it's always a shock to me, quite frankly, is children from the age of 10 to 14 years of age, believe it or not. If you have a child that's in middle school, about to go to middle school, please come join us at the Meadows Branch Library on the 27th and learn more about this, because it is an issue. It is a challenge. A lot of times parents feel like they can wait till high school before getting into these topics. I'm sorry to say that's not the case. By mid to late elementary school, we should already be all over this with our child. And then finally, adults could use some help too managing depression. And we're going to be doing a special presentation at the Louisville Library on October 21st from 6:30 to 8, focusing specifically on this topic. Are you going to be there? And Kate Ellard is going to be participating in that talk as well. So come meet Kate on the 21st. And I can't urge you enough to consider going to the 11th annual Hope event. I am very lucky. One of the benefits of OLD is I had the pleasure of being involved with the Hope Coalition when we started many years ago. I've attended several of these Hope events. I have to tell you, even though I knew what was going to happen at those events, I helped plan some of the earliest events. It was so powerful for me. I mean, it impacted me just so powerfully because of the way that this event is put together. You're gonna hear from people that have struggled with depression. You're gonna hear from kids that have dealt with this issue. It's such an informative, powerful, dynamic presentation. And I have to tell you, the Hope Coalition has perfected it. This is their 11th effort. Practice makes perfect. And I can promise you that if you go to this event, you're going to have a real emotional experience that's going to be something that's going to benefit you and your family. And, there's nothing wrong with bringing teens. Is that right, Kathy?
Absolutely.
Teens are welcome
We're
to come to this event as well.
It's youth and parents.
And there are mental
That's a
health
focus.
professionals who volunteer their time that are
They
going to
will
be
be
there as
there.
well.
They will.
Any questions?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of small group work
Yes.
where people really get to talk and share. This isn't just a bunch of talking heads or voices. I'm not going to mention anything in particular in that regard, but this is an opportunity to really interact in small group as well as large group. And you've heard from Kathy. She's a great resource for you, and you can actually contact her directly at her email address, which is listed at the bottom of your
Mhm.
screen. And please, even though you don't have to register, it helps them to get a sense as to how many people are going to show up. So if you can, it's wonderful to register for this event at pennbv.org/hope. Again, any other questions about this or anything else that we've talked about? If we're not able to cover it right now, because we're going to go to some questions and answers in the few minutes we have left, you can always contact me directly at info@boulderpsychologicalservices.com. My pleasure to answer any questions that you may have. Let's look at our chat box, though, because I think we did have another question that came in. Any comments on herbal and vitamin supplements to address depression? Who would like to respond to that?
This is Kate. I think they can be very useful for mild to moderate depression. I am not an expert in those treatments and recommendations, but there are many people in the community who are professionals in this. At many of your natural grocers or pharmacies, they have experts. They have naturopath doctors, I believe, in those aisles. And there are some, I know there's a psychiatrist in Fort Collins, Dr. Scott Shannon, who is providing quite holistic psychiatric care. And so again, be a very thorough and great assessment. And he uses a lot of herbal and other supplements as well.
Just to piggyback off of that, Dr. Shannon has a really good book, if you look up his name, that talks about children and adolescents and ways to help them with herbal and vitamin remedies, which he does also in Fort Collins. But if you would like to know more about it, that's a really good resource, is his book.
And I guess I would also caution that, once again, it's always nice to think we could do this on our own.
Yes.
But if you know of a naturopathic, a nutritional therapist or counselor, someone who can guide you and work with you to know what's the best for your body, because you have to be a little careful still with interactions. If you happen to be on any other kind of medications, it would be helpful to make sure you're not just doing this on your own.
Yes.
But I would absolutely suggest that that's another treatment,
Another part.
but not totally on our own. Let's make sure that we have somebody who knows helping us with this.
Agreed, Kathy.
I want to thank my guests today, Kathy Valentine from the Hope Coalition, Erin Diddleberger, Kate Ellard from Boulder Psychological Services, for helping us with this important topic. I hope that it's useful to you and your family. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Bye.